Ladies and gentlemen, when we talk about the human brain, about the architecture of thought, the scaffolding of emotion, and the fragile but resilient nature of memory, we are talking about one of the most mysterious frontiers of existence. For decades, scientists, philosophers, and dreamers alike have searched for explanations to the riddles of why we love, why we connect, and why we long for companionship. In the language of biology, love is often described as neurochemical choreography. Dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, norepinephrine, tiny molecules dancing across synapses, shaping the rhythm of our hearts and the direction of our lives. But when you step beyond the microscope, beyond the data points and graphs, you realize something startling. Love is not merely chemical. It is structural, it is evolutionary, and above all, it is profoundly human. The mystery of a life partner. The person we choose to share not just our happiness, but our failures, our sleepless nights, our restless ambitions, is among the most transformative questions any person can face. For some, it is answered early. For others, it takes years, decades even, for that recognition to crystallize. And when it does, the entire architecture of your existence shifts. Suddenly, the way neurons fire when you wake up in the morning feels different. The cortisol spikes from stress diminish more quickly. The immune system steadies. The mind quiets. A future that once looked like a maze becomes a path, not because the obstacles are gone, but because the meaning is there to face them. Think about how every culture in human history has placed extraordinary weight on the symbolism of marriage. From ancient tribal ceremonies under starlit skies to the vows exchanged in modern cathedrals or simple courthouses, the unifying thread is not the ritual itself, but the recognition of unity. Anthropologists describe this as social signaling, the way communities stabilize through partnership. But as a neuroscientist, what strikes me most is not the sociology of the event, but the neurology behind it. When one human being finally finds another who mirrors not only their desires, but their deepest vulnerabilities, the brain undergoes what can only be described as reconfiguration. A mystery finally solved not in words, but in wiring. I've often reflected on case studies of long-term partners whose very biology seemed to converge over time. Researchers at UC Berkeley studied couples married for over 40 years and discovered something remarkable: their breathing patterns, heart rates, even cortisol rhythms began to synchronize. In other words, the body does not merely live beside another, it lives with another, and over time, becomes attuned to that other, as if two instruments are finally playing in harmony. To me, that's more profound than any poetic metaphor. It's science telling us that the human experience of partnership is not just about external commitment, but an internal symphony written in biology itself. But let's ask a deeper question. Why does it matter that the mystery of a life partner becomes solved? Why is it not enough to simply pursue personal success, intellectual brilliance, or technological achievement? The answer lies in the limits of the brain itself. We are wired for survival. Yes, but survival alone is not the highest order of existence. Evolution favored those who bonded, those who nurtured, those who could rely on one another in times of scarcity and fear. Love, in its truest form, is not a luxury of the modern world. It is an adaptation, a biological tool that allows human beings not only to endure but to aspire. When we look at innovation, ambition, or progress, it's easy to assume they are individual pursuits. But no great leap in history has ever been made in isolation. Behind every invention, behind every movement, there are human connections that fueled the perseverance required. Consider Marie and Pierre Curie, whose partnership, in both science and life, not only unlocked discoveries about radioactivity, but showed us that shared purpose amplifies possibility. Or think of the countless unnamed couples whose shared labor, whether in agriculture, art, or resilience, laid the foundation of civilizations. The future spouse of any visionary figure is not a mere companion. They are a co-architect of legacy, whether history writes their name or not. I recall a clinical case of a patient who had suffered a traumatic brain injury. For months, their recovery was stagnant, no measurable improvement in memory or motor coordination. Then, their spouse began spending entire days at the bedside, reading familiar stories, singing old songs. Slowly, the patient began responding. Neuroimaging revealed activation in dormant areas of the brain. When asked later what had shifted, the patient simply said, "She was there." This is not anecdotal sentimentality. This is measurable science. The presence of a deeply bonded partner has the ability to alter neural plasticity itself. In other words, the mystery of who we love becomes the mystery of who we can become. And isn't that the ultimate question? Not just, who is she? Or who is he? But, who are we together? Because when the enigma of a future wife or husband is finally solved, it is not merely about identity, it is about possibility. It is about unlocking versions of ourselves we could never access in isolation. Yet let us be honest, partnership is not perfection. It is not the absence of conflict or the guarantee of stability. Neuroscience shows us that the very circuits responsible for attachment are also those that make us vulnerable to pain. Oxytocin, the so-called love hormone, is released in moments of tenderness, but it is also released during conflict, deepening the emotional weight of disagreements. To love is to risk rewiring yourself in ways that make separation unbearable. But this risk is precisely what gives meaning to the commitment. You cannot separate the beauty of unity from the vulnerability it demands. For years, many have speculated about what kind of partner could stand beside someone relentlessly pursuing goals on a global or even interplanetary scale. The assumption is that the answer must be extraordinary, unconventional, perhaps even mysterious. But neuroscience teaches us something subtler. What sustains a person is not spectacle but stability. It is not constant admiration but deep attunement. The mystery of the right partner is often solved not in dramatic gestures, but in the quiet recognition of shared rhythms, of someone who can walk beside you when no one else can. In evolutionary terms, this makes perfect sense. Our species thrived not because of the dominance of the strongest individuals, but because of cooperation, pair bonding, and long-term nurturing. The future spouse of any figure, whether celebrated or anonymous, represents not only personal companionship, but also evolutionary success. The human story continues because of these partnerships. And when one is revealed, when mystery becomes clarity, we are not just learning about a private relationship, we are witnessing the continuation of a story older than civilization itself. Ladies and gentlemen, the brain is the most complex system in the known universe. But when it comes to love, its purpose is clear: to find coherence in another, to merge survival with meaning, and to transform uncertainty into a shared future. The question of who that person is may ignite speculation, fascination, even controversy. But the deeper truth is this: the identity of a life partner is not about mystery solved in public. It is about mystery solved in the private architecture of two human beings who find that their futures are stronger together than apart. And in that moment, when the neurons quiet, when the heart steadies, when the search ends, the most profound realization dawns. It is not simply that the mystery of a future wife or husband has been solved. It is that the mystery of yourself, who you are meant to be, what you are capable of, why you are here, begins at last to unfold. Ladies and gentlemen, let us linger for a moment on this extraordinary transformation. The way a single human relationship can reframe not only the present, but also the trajectory of the future. In neuroscience, we often speak of critical periods, windows of time when the brain is particularly malleable to new inputs. Childhood is the most obvious example, when language, motor skills, and social behaviors are absorbed with astonishing ease. But what is less commonly understood is that moments of profound human connection, falling in love, committing to partnership, becoming a parent, also represent critical periods. During these chapters, the adult brain undergoes neuroplastic changes that rival those of early development. Neural circuits reorganize, priorities realign, and the sense of self undergoes a kind of rebirth. Imagine two individuals who have walked their lives independently for decades, shaped by unique experiences, traumas, dreams, and failures. Their brains have encoded patterns of behavior, defensive mechanisms, ways of interpreting the world. Then they meet, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, the brain begins to bend toward the other. Synaptic connections associated with trust, empathy, and bonding are strengthened, while old circuits of isolation or hyper-independence weaken. Over months and years, this neurological dance creates something entirely new, a shared mental ecosystem. And this is not poetry, it is science. Functional MRI scans reveal that couples in long-term committed relationships often show parallel patterns of neural activity when exposed to the same stimuli, as though their brains are practicing alignment over and over until it becomes second nature. It raises a compelling thought. Perhaps the mystery of a future wife, a future husband, is not solved in the dramatic unveiling of identity, but in the quiet neurological alignment that transforms two stories into one. The reveal may capture headlines, but the real miracle is happening deep inside the folds of the brain, invisible to the eye yet shaping the course of destiny. There is, however, another layer to this mystery, one that often goes unspoken. Love and partnership, as powerful as they are never simply about the present. They are about resilience against the future. Stress, uncertainty, loss, ambition, and even the relentless march of aging all conspire to erode our mental and physical health. And yet, study after study reveals that those with deeply bonded partners not only live longer but live healthier. The Framingham Heart Study, which has tracked thousands of individuals for over 7 decades, found that those in strong, supportive marriages had lower risks of cardiovascular disease, greater immune function, and even better cognitive preservation in old age. Now, some might dismiss this as correlation, not causation. But neuroscientific evidence tells a deeper story. When stress hormones flood the bloodstream, they impair immune function, disrupt sleep, and accelerate cellular aging. But the simple presence of a trusted partner, someone who listens, someone who shares the burden, measurably reduces cortisol levels, and when cortisol falls, the body heals. The immune system reactivates. Telomeres, the protective caps at the end of chromosomes linked to aging, degrade more slowly. In other words, love literally rewires biology to extend life. This truth illuminates why the revelation of a life partner carries such emotional weight in public imagination. It is not merely curiosity about identity, it is subconscious recognition that the human story cannot be written alone. We all sense, in our deepest wiring, that partnership is one of the few forces capable of bending time, of slowing decay, of making the unbearable bearable. But let us not romanticize without realism. Relationships are not static sanctuaries. They are living systems, constantly negotiating balance between individuality and unity. Neuroscientists studying conflict in couples have shown that arguments often trigger the amygdala, the brain's alarm system, much as a predator might. The fight or flight response flares, words sharpen, and the body readies for battle. Yet, in couples who endure, what happens next is critical. The prefrontal cortex engages, dampening the amygdala, enabling empathy, compromise, and repair. This cycle, rupture and repair, is what differentiates sustainable partnerships from fragile ones. To love is not to avoid conflict. It is to build neural pathways of reconciliation. And when those pathways deepen, the bond becomes stronger than before. Now, imagine what it means for someone in the public eye, someone whose life is scrutinized under a microscope, whose decisions ripple across industries and continents, to solve the mystery of a life partner. It is not simply a personal milestone. It is a recalibration of energy, of focus, of possibility. History reminds us that even the most brilliant minds draw strength from intimacy. Albert Einstein once admitted that his wife Mileva was not only his partner, but his intellectual sparring counterpart in his early work. Martin Luther King Jr.'s voice carried across a nation, but it was Coretta who gave him steadiness in the quiet hours, who absorbed his doubts and replenished his spirit. The greatest leaps of human progress are often powered by unseen partnerships. This is why, when the world hears that a mystery like this has been solved, it is more than gossip. It is a signal, however subtle, that the trajectory of a life, and perhaps history itself, has shifted. Because with every great love comes not only companionship, but also transformation. The discovery of a future wife is not the end of a search. It is the beginning of a new equation in which two sets of variables merge to solve problems neither could have solved alone. Consider what happens on a cellular level when two people form a bond that endures. Epigenetics, the study of how environment and experience alter gene expression, tells us that love does not just change the mind, it changes the body at the genetic level. Couples who sustain long-term connection exhibit altered gene expression in immune cells, producing more antibodies and fewer inflammatory markers. Parents who share strong partnerships pass down not only psychological stability to their children, but potentially healthier genetic legacies as well. The mystery of love solved is, in fact, the mystery of biology itself reshaping across generations. Ladies and gentlemen, when we step back from the chemistry and the scans, when we strip away the sociological theories and the clinical studies, what remains is something both humbling and profound. The mystery of a life partner reminds us of our fragility. We are not designed to walk this life alone. Our brains are wired for connection. Our survival depends on trust, and our flourishing depends on love. The unveiling of a spouse, the announcement that the search has ended, that the mystery has finally found its answer. It stirs something primal in us all, not because we seek spectacle, but because it reflects our own longing, our own unfinished stories. Every person in this room has, at some point, felt the pull of that question: who will walk with me? Who will share not just my triumphs, but my failures, my fears, my sleepless nights? And when someone finds that person, it becomes a beacon, a reminder that the search is worth it. The identity of a future wife, once revealed, does not merely complete a personal narrative. It illuminates the universal truth that the most powerful mysteries in life are solved not in laboratories or in headlines, but in the quiet alignment of two human beings deciding, against the chaos of the world, to build a future together. And perhaps, when the world sees such a revelation, it is not just curiosity being satisfied. It is hope being rekindled. Hope that even in an era of uncertainty, ambition, and relentless change, the oldest mystery of all, the search for love, can still be solved. Ladies and gentlemen, what is striking about this timeless mystery is that it reveals as much about humanity as it does about any single individual. When one person solves the enigma of love, it casts a light outward, reflecting into the lives of all who witness it. It says this too is possible for you. It reminds us that even amidst ambition, struggle, and the enormity of existence, there is a truth both tender and unshakable, that no matter how much technology advances, how far rockets travel, or how deeply science explores, the human need for connection will remain the bedrock of meaning. As a neuroscientist, I am often asked what the ultimate measure of intelligence is. Some argue it is problem-solving capacity, the ability to innovate, to create tools and strategies for survival. Others suggest it is adaptability, the capacity to reframe the mind in the face of new challenges. But I would argue something different. The truest measure of intelligence is the ability to connect, to understand another, to bridge the gap between self and other, to harmonize rather than divide. That is not only intelligence, it is wisdom. When a future spouse steps into view, when the veil of mystery is lifted, it is more than the confirmation of identity. It is the demonstration of this very principle that intelligence, brilliance, achievement, none of it is sustainable without the anchor of connection. We can marvel at discoveries, celebrate triumphs, applaud ambition, but the human story is always incomplete without love. And when we finally see that puzzle piece in place, the picture of a life, even one we have only admired from afar, suddenly makes more sense. Now, allow me to take you further into the intricacies of the brain's dance with love, because it is here, in these hidden depths, that we find the most profound lessons. When two people bond, mirror neurons, those extraordinary cells that fire both when we act and when we observe another acting, begin to synchronize. This is why partners often pick up each other's mannerisms, finish each other's sentences, or even feel physical pain when the other is suffering. The brain, quite literally, blurs the boundary between self and other. It ceases to operate as an isolated island, and instead becomes part of a shared neural network. Think about the implications of this. To reveal a partner is to reveal not just a name or a face, but a merging of identities. Two lives become entangled, not only in memory and habit, but in the very fabric of biology. That is why the loss of love feels like the tearing of flesh. The brain has written the other into its architecture, and it is why the discovery of love feels like a new birth. The brain has expanded, welcoming the other as part of its circuitry. There is an old parable about a scientist who spent his life mapping the stars, charting every constellation, measuring every orbit, yet felt an inexplicable emptiness. One evening, while walking with his wife, she pointed not to the heavens, but to the reflection of the stars shimmering in a lake at their feet. He realized then that all the cosmic knowledge in the world meant little without someone to share it with. The stars above and the stars reflected below were the same, but only in her presence did he truly see them. That, I think, is the essence of why this moment matters, why the world pays attention when the mystery of a life partner is solved. It is not idle curiosity. It is a recognition that the stars in our own lives shine brighter when reflected through the presence of another. And so we must ask ourselves, what does it mean for our own lives? We may not all live on stages of influence, but each of us carries ambitions, struggles, and private universes within. The question of a life partner is not about status or spectacle. It is about who will steady us when our inner orbits falter, who will amplify our light when we cannot see it ourselves. And when we witness someone else discover that answer, we are reminded that we too are capable of such discovery, no matter how long the search. The world often emphasizes independence, strength, the lone hero who conquers adversity. But biology whispers a different story. It tells us that the strongest organisms are those that cooperate, that the most enduring legacies are built not in isolation but in union. Even the neurons in your brain, those 86 billion tiny sparks, accomplish nothing alone. They exist only in networks, in constant dialogue, building meaning through connection. Why should the human heart be any different? So when at last the announcement is made, when the identity of a future wife becomes known, it is not a final chapter, but a beginning. It is a declaration of shared strength, of resilience built not on individual genius, but on partnership. It is a reminder that our humanity is never more fully expressed than when we choose to bind our lives with another. And in that moment, whether you are a scientist studying the chemistry of love, a philosopher pondering its meaning, or simply a human being yearning for connection, you are confronted with the same truth. The mystery has been solved not because we have explained love, but because we have chosen it. Ladies and gentlemen, love will always remain, in part, a mystery. Science may map its circuits, psychology may trace its origins, but the lived experience of it, the way it reshapes the mind, heals the body, ignites the future, that cannot be fully captured by data. And perhaps that is as it should be. For if love were entirely predictable, entirely explainable, it would lose the very magic that makes it worth seeking. So tonight, let us celebrate not the end of a mystery, but the continuation of one. Let us honor the fact that when two lives intertwine, they create something greater than the sum of their parts. And let us remember that in solving the riddle of love, we do not close the book. We open it to chapters yet unwritten. And as we step forward, each of us, in our own journeys, may we carry this truth that no ambition, no dream, no discovery is truly complete until it is shared. That in finding another, we do not just solve the mystery of who they are, we solve, in part, the mystery of who we are meant to become. Thank you.